I'll never forget that night. It's etched into my memory like a scar, and to this day, I can't shake the images of what happened. It all started with a bad decision, one that I'd give anything to undo. I had been driving for hours, maybe even days. The trip was supposed to be quick, just a few days away from the grind of life, but somewhere along the way, I lost track of time. The highway stretched endlessly, a ribbon of asphalt snaking through the darkness. My car's headlights were the only thing that kept the void at bay. Then I saw it. A small motel, its flickering neon sign reading vacancy. It wasn't much, just a few shabby rooms tucked away from any major town. It felt like a place no one would ever come to unless they had nowhere else to go. But by then, I was too tired to care. I needed a place to sleep. I pulled into the parking lot, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. The motel looked even worse up close, with broken windows and peeling paint. But it was open, and at that hour, that was all that mattered. I parked the car and walked into the lobby. Behind the counter was a man, maybe in his late 50s. His name was Frank, and he gave me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He wasn't unfriendly, but there was something unsettling about him, like he was expecting me. "You traveling alone?" he asked, his voice gravelly, as if he'd smoked a pack of cigarettes a day for decades. "Yeah," I replied, trying to shake off the feeling that had crept up on me. I told him I needed a room for the night. Frank's eyes lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary. "Room 7. It's down the hall. Stay away from the back door." Just a word of advice. I didn't ask why. I was tired, and I just wanted to get some rest. The room wasn't much better than the outside. Old, musty carpet, stained sheets, a flickering light above the bed. But it was a bed. I threw my bag onto the chair and collapsed on the mattress, already half asleep. That's when I heard the sound. A soft tap, tap, tap coming from somewhere outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind or maybe the motel settling, but then it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the back door. I wasn't sure if I should investigate. Part of me thought I should just ignore it, but something gnawed at me. I slowly got up, my feet heavy on the worn carpet, and crept toward the door. The tapping grew louder, more frantic, almost like it was calling me. I hesitated at the door, my hand resting on the doorknob. What the hell was going on? Then suddenly, the sound stopped. I waited. Silence. My heart was pounding in my chest. But before I could turn away, the door behind me creaked open just a crack. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity. The door behind me was open just a sliver, and I could feel the cold draft creeping in from the dark hallway beyond. My pulse quickened and a sense of dread settled into the pit of my stomach. I had no idea what I was about to face, but I couldn't turn back now. Something or someone was waiting for me. I slowly pushed the door open just enough to peer out into the dimly lit hallway. There was no one in sight. The motel seemed utterly still, but there was an odd, oppressive silence that made every breath feel too loud. The back door to the motel was at the end of the hall, and I could just make out the faintest flicker of light coming from beneath it. It wasn't the usual light you'd expect from a hallway. This one was uneven, almost like the glow of a lantern. I don't know why, but my feet started moving, pulling me toward that door. Every step felt like it took longer than the last, as if the floor was somehow sticking to my shoes. As I reached the door, I stopped. Something was wrong. I could hear something on the other side. Soft whispers, hushed voices. They sounded like people, but they weren't speaking English. The words were garbled, unintelligible, but there was an edge to them that sent a chill down my spine. It sounded like they were right behind the door, just inches away from me. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, but before I could turn it, the whispers stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I took a step back. That's when I saw something I'll never forget. In the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a figure in the farthest corner of the hallway. It was just a shadow, but it was unmistakable. There was someone standing there, just out of view, as if they had been watching me the whole time. I turned my head quickly, but there was nothing. The hallway was empty. The shadows had swallowed up the figure, and I was left alone with my racing thoughts. But I wasn't alone. I felt it, something breathing down my neck. It wasn't the draft from the hallway. No, this was something else. Something far too close, too real. I spun around, my heart pounding, but there was no one there. Nothing but the flickering light above my head and the empty room behind me. Then, a voice, a whisper, low and slow, slipped into my ear. Leave. It wasn't Frank. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The voice seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. I had to leave. I had to get out of that room, out of that motel. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed my things, yanked the door open, and dashed out into the cold night air, not looking back once. The gravel crunched beneath my feet as I ran toward my car, heart hammering in my chest. But as I reached the car, something made me stop. I looked back at the motel, my breath clouding in the cold night. And there, in the window of room 7, was a face. A pale, lifeless face staring at me with hollow eyes. I turned away quickly, my stomach churning. I jumped into the car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I started the engine and sped away. But even as I left the motel behind, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I couldn't escape whatever that place was. Whatever it had been waiting for. I thought I was safe. For the next few days, I told myself it was just my imagination, that the tension from driving so long had finally cracked me. But the thing about fear is that it doesn't let go so easily. It lingers like an old wound that never quite heals, and the memories of that motel kept coming back in flashes. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear the whispering, feel the cold breath on my neck. I couldn't outrun it. I tried to shake it off. But as the days passed, I began to notice things. Little things. Like the fact that the shadow of the motel seemed to follow me. It was subtle at first, just the odd feeling of being watched, a strange chill in the air, but it grew worse. I'd see the outline of something in my rearview mirror when I drove, but whenever I glanced over my shoulder, nothing would be there. At night, the lights in my apartment flickered and the whispers would return, just faint enough to make me doubt my own sanity. But then it happened again. One night, as I was driving down the highway, the same stretch of road that I had traveled when I first saw that motel, I saw the sign. Vacancy. That same broken, flickering neon light. I don't know why I even slowed down, but my hands felt like they had a mind of their own. Before I knew it, I had pulled into the parking lot. The place looked even worse this time, like it had decayed in the few days I had been away. The walls were even more weathered and the lights outside buzzed, flickering sporadically as if they were about to give up altogether. I told myself I was just curious. I needed answers. There was no way I could just forget about what happened, what I saw. I had to go back. I stepped into the lobby and Frank was there. His eyes were hollow, sunken deep into his face like he hadn't slept in days. But when he saw me, there was a glimmer of recognition in his expression. "You came back," he said, his voice flat. "I don't know why," I muttered. "Something's wrong here. I need to know what's going on." Frank's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. "Some things are better left unknown, my friend." But I wasn't leaving. Not without answers. I took the key he handed me, room 7, and walked down the hallway. The air felt heavy, suffocating, like the building itself was alive and waiting for something. As I passed the back door, I felt a sharp, ice-cold draft wash over me. The same one I'd felt before. I glanced at the door, and for a split second, I saw movement through the crack, someone or something standing in the dark, waiting. The tapping started again, quiet at first, then louder, faster, like it was approaching me. I didn't think. I couldn't. I just bolted down the hall, into room 7. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, trying to steady my breathing. But that's when I heard it. The tapping. Louder. And this time it was coming from inside the room. I turned and the air seemed to freeze. The room was different. The bed was no longer where I'd left it. The carpet, the walls, everything was wrong. It was as if the room had shifted. The walls seemed to close in on me and I could hear the whispers again, clear as day. It wasn't just one voice now. It was a chorus speaking in tongues I couldn't understand. The sound felt like it was coming from every corner of the room, pressing in on me, suffocating me. Suddenly, the door behind me flew open, slamming against the wall with a deafening crash. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. Then I saw it. The same pale face from the window. It was standing in the doorway, its eyes hollow, its mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. "Leave," the voice hissed again, but this time it wasn't just a whisper, it was a scream, echoing in my head, tearing at my sanity. I turned and ran. I didn't care where I went anymore. I just needed to escape. I raced down the hallway, past the back door, past Frank, who was standing in the shadows, watching me with that same unsettling smile. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, speeding away with the motel fading behind me. But I knew it wasn't over. The motel wasn't done with me. It had claimed me. And no matter how far I ran, it would always be waiting. And the worst part? It was following me even now. The road blurred in front of me as I sped through the night. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The motel, that thing, was still fresh in my mind like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those hollow eyes staring back at me, but each time I only saw the empty road behind. I thought I had escaped, but I was wrong. The next few days were a blur. The whispers didn't stop. They followed me, haunting my thoughts when I tried to sleep. The once clear memory of the motel was starting to twist, like an infection spreading through my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was coming closer, closing in on me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I'd heard footsteps outside my door. I'd rush to the window and see nothing. Then one night, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do. I went to the mirror. I didn't know why. I guess I just wanted to see myself, to remind myself that I was still real. But when I looked at my reflection, something was wrong. At first, it was subtle, a flicker in the glass, like a shadow moving in the corner of my vision. I blinked and it was gone. But as I stared, it came back. A figure. It wasn't me. It was standing behind me. A pale silhouette, its eyes dark and empty, just like the one I'd seen at the motel. It moved closer, its face twisting into a grotesque smile. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my legs freezing to the floor. I turned, but no one was there. The room was empty. I glanced back at the mirror. The figure was still there, its face closer now, its mouth stretched wide in a grin that shouldn't have been possible. The shadows around it seemed to flicker, shifting in unnatural ways. It whispered my name. Leave. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the chair behind me, my heart racing in panic. I had to get out, but I couldn't. It was like the walls were closing in on me, the air thick and suffocating. The mirror seemed to pull me in, the figure beckoning me, taunting me with its silent laughter. I turned away again, shutting my eyes. I couldn't look. I couldn't breathe. When I finally dared to open them, the figure was gone. But something had changed. The air was heavier now, charged with a presence I couldn't see but could feel all around me. It was as if the very room itself had become part of the nightmare. The whispers were louder now, not in the corners of my mind but around me, filling the space. I felt it. It was inside. Suddenly, the reflection in the mirror shifted. There was no one behind me anymore. But in the glass, I could see the outline of the motel. Room 7. The flickering light. The pale face staring at me from the window. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't a whisper. It's not over. I had to leave. I had to leave right then, but I wasn't sure if I was still in my apartment or if I was back at that cursed place. I ran out the door, but as I stepped into the hallway, I realized I wasn't alone. There were others now, figures in the dark, standing still, waiting, watching. Their faces were pale and empty, their eyes staring at me through the shadows. They didn't speak. They didn't move. But they were there. And they knew me. I ran out of the building. I didn't care where I went anymore. I just needed to escape. But when I got to my car, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, in the reflection of the windshield, was the figure again. Only this time, it wasn't just one. There were dozens of them standing behind me, their hollow eyes staring out from the darkness. I slammed my eyes shut, shaking my head. When I opened them again, they were gone. But I could still feel them, behind me, following me, waiting for me to stop running. Because I knew now. The motel hadn't just claimed the building. It had claimed me. And it was never going to let me go. The days stretched on, each one a blur of confusion and dread. The nightmare that began at that motel had taken root in my mind, and no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape it. It wasn't just the shadows or the whispers anymore, it was something much worse. The motel, that place, had become part of me. It was as though I was being pulled back, sucked into its grasp with every passing hour. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was closing in on me, tightening its grip with every step I took. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know how or why, but I could feel it in my bones. The motel wasn't just a building. It wasn't just a place. It was alive. It had a hold on me, a connection that went deeper than any normal fear. And every time I thought I had escaped, it would pull me back. Like it knew my every move, my every thought. I was a shell of myself by the time I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to go back. I had to confront whatever it was that had been haunting me. The journey back felt like a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. The road stretched endlessly before me, but no matter how fast I drove, I knew it wasn't fast enough. My thoughts were a jumble, every one of them screaming at me to turn around, to run far away. But deep down, I knew that was impossible. I pulled into the parking lot of the motel again. This time, the neon sign flickered so badly that the letters were almost indecipherable. The place looked worse than before, abandoned, decrepit, as if time had forgotten it entirely. But there was something new about it. Something more sinister. I could feel it in the air, a heaviness that seemed to press down on me from all sides. I walked into the lobby, but Frank wasn't there. Instead, it was another man behind the counter, one I had never seen before. His face was pale, like a man who hadn't seen the sun in years. His eyes were sunken, hollow, just like Frank's. But there was something even more unsettling about him. His smile was wide, stretching far too far for a human mouth. "You came back," he said. His voice was cold, lifeless. "We've been waiting for you." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I didn't even need to ask. I knew what he meant. The motel was waiting for me. And there was no escape this time. He handed me the key to room 7. I didn't protest. I didn't argue. I just took the key and walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The door to room 7 was open when I reached it. The room looked exactly the same as I remembered it, except now the air felt wrong. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move, twisting in unnatural ways. The whispers were back, louder than ever. They filled my head, drowned out my thoughts. I stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind me, locking me in. I turned, heart pounding, and saw them. The figures. Hundreds of them, their pale faces pressed against the walls, watching me with those empty eyes. They didn't move. They didn't speak. But they were there. And then, in the far corner of the room, I saw the door. It was different from the others. The wood was black, its surface cracked and splintered. There was a faint light coming from the other side. A cold, harsh light that seemed to draw me in. I knew what I had to do. I had to open it. It was the only way out. The only way to end it. I walked toward the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The whispers grew louder, louder than before, until it felt like my head was going to split open. But I couldn't stop. I opened the door. The cold air hit me like a wave, and I stepped through into a hallway I'd never seen before. The walls were decaying, peeling away in strips, revealing the bare bones of the building. There were no lights. Only darkness, thick and suffocating. And then I saw it. At the end of the hallway, there was a figure. Tall, impossibly tall, its face hidden in shadow. I couldn't see its features, but I could feel its presence. It was waiting for me. And in that moment, I knew. It was the thing that had been following me. The thing that had been haunting me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to turn and run, but I couldn't. It was too late. The figure stepped forward, its long, thin fingers stretching toward me, and I understood. It wasn't just a shadow. It was part of the motel. Part of the curse. It was the motel itself in its truest form. I looked back, but the door I had just come through was gone. The hallway stretched endlessly before me. And then the whispers stopped. Everything stopped. Except for the figure. It reached for me, its fingers brushing against my skin. And then the darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up, but not in the way I expected. It was as though I had opened my eyes only to find myself staring into the same nightmare, repeating over and over, trapped in a loop I couldn't break. The walls of room 7 were the same, yet somehow different, more decayed, more alive. I could still hear the whispers. They were soft at first, like an echo from the past, but they grew louder as I sat up in the bed, heart hammering in my chest. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the very room itself had absorbed the terror of all who had ever stayed here. And that was the thing, the truth I could no longer deny. I wasn't the first to fall into this trap. I wasn't even the second. I tried to move, but my body felt like it was made of lead. I could feel the presence of others in the room, even though my eyes told me I was alone. The shadows twisted and writhed along the walls, flickering with a life of their own. The temperature dropped, and my breath fogged in front of me, even though I wasn't cold. And then I heard it. The door creaked open behind me. I didn't dare turn around. I already knew what I would see. There, standing in the doorway, was the figure. That towering, formless silhouette, its face obscured by darkness, its presence suffocating everything in the room. It reached out toward me, its thin fingers stretching like tendrils in the air. But this time, I didn't feel the same terror I had before. No, this time I was calm. I had come to understand something in the moments before I woke up, before I was dragged back into this nightmare. I was not a victim. I was a part of it. The motel, the figure, it had taken me, yes, but it wasn't just trapping me. It was making me part of its cycle, its endless loop. Each time someone entered room 7, each time someone entered the motel, they became part of the curse. And now it was my turn to carry on the terror. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I stood, a mere puppet now, bound by the invisible strings of this twisted place. The figure didn't touch me. It didn't need to. It just stood there, watching, waiting for me to understand my place in its world. As my mind started to fragment, to break under the weight of it all. I felt the walls of room 7 shift, reforming. The once familiar room started to dissolve, pulling me into the next layer of the nightmare. But it wasn't just the room that was changing. The whispers grew louder. And then I realized with a sinking feeling in my chest, the whispers were not just in my head. They were from the people who had come before me. The ones who had stayed in room 7, trapped in the same cycle I now found myself in. They were still here, their voices, their torment, all lingering in the shadows. I stepped forward, moving toward the door that had been a gateway to my torment. But when I reached for the handle, the motel didn't let me go. It kept me locked inside, just as it had done with all those who came before. And so I understood. I was no longer alone. I had become part of the cycle. And there would be others, more victims, more souls to join the twisted dance of the motel, each one hearing the whispers, seeing the shadow, and slowly realizing, too late, that they too would never escape. The lights flickered and the figure in the doorway began to smile, its hollow grin widening as if pleased with the fate it had sealed for me. And just like that, I was part of the motel. The curse. The endless loop. It was my turn now. It was over. Or so I thought. I stood in the heart of the motel now, no longer just a visitor, no longer just a witness. I was part of it. The very air I breathed seemed to hum with the twisted energy of the place. The shadows stretched, moving with a mind of their own, ever present. The whispers were deafening now, all around me, filling the space, consuming the silence. And in the thick of it all, I could feel the pull of the room. Room 7. But there was something different this time. A disturbance. A flicker in the cycle. For the first time, the presence behind me shifted. Not the figure in the hallway. Not the whispering voices, but something else. Something new. A visitor. The door to room 7 opened, and in stepped a man. A traveler. He looked just like I had when I first arrived. Tired. Worn out from the road. He walked in, not sensing the weight of the place, not yet feeling the darkness closing in around him. His eyes were fixed on the room, unaware of the impending horror. But I knew. He stepped toward the bed, the flickering light above casting eerie shadows across his face. The whispers swirled around him, calling to him, tugging at his mind. He didn't hear them yet, but I did. I wanted to scream, to warn him, but my voice was trapped. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Not anymore. I watched him settle down on the bed, his tired eyes closing as he tried to rest. But the motel didn't let anyone rest. Not anymore. The whispers grew louder, sharper, pressing against the walls, growing in intensity. The room was changing again. I could see it, every crack, every crevice, every shadow was part of the transformation. The walls stretched out toward him as though reaching for him. The air grew colder. The room shifted like it had done before, its very form warping, becoming something darker. And then the tapping started again. It was soft at first, barely audible, but it grew louder, more persistent. It was coming from behind him, from the darkness that had once been the back door. The man didn't move. He was too exhausted, too unaware. I wanted to warn him, but I couldn't. And that's when I saw it, the figure standing just beyond the door, its silhouette stretching into the shadows. The man still didn't see it. He didn't hear it. But I did. I saw the figure step forward, its hands long and thin, reaching for him, its eyes hollow, black, and endless, locked onto him. The tapping grew frantic, faster, louder, like it was calling out to him, drawing him closer to the edge. And then, the whisper came again, louder than ever. Leave. But it wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me. I felt the familiar pull, the curse that had once gripped me. And for the first time, I understood. I wasn't a victim. Not anymore. I was a part of it. The curse had claimed me, and now I was the one who would continue the cycle. I moved toward the man, drawn to him by the same force that had brought me here. He could hear the whispers now. He could feel the shadows crawling up his skin. The motel had claimed him, just as it had claimed me. He opened his eyes, and for the briefest moment, he saw me, the broken, hollow version of what he would soon become. His eyes widened in terror, but it was too late. I wasn't there to help him. I was there to make sure he didn't escape. I watched as he stood, panic flooding his face, but there was nowhere to run. Not anymore. The figure in the doorway was moving closer now. The shadows reached for him, pulling him toward the corner of the room. The air grew thick, suffocating. As the whispers screamed in my ears, now 1,000 voices, calling out to him, beckoning him into the cycle. I stepped back, watching as the man fought to break free. His body convulsed, his eyes wide with fear. But the shadows closed in on him, his body jerking toward the back door. And then, with one final, desperate scream, the figure grabbed him. And just like that, he was gone. I stood there, breathing in the stillness, knowing the cycle had started again. The motel would never stop, not until it had claimed every last soul. And now I was its keeper,